Hey everybody, this is Rod Melton, the Book of Mormon Evidence Guy, and I have with me a special friend that
There you go.
that
Yeah.
should be no stranger to any of you who have been watching our podcast in the past. This is Jonathan Neville. He's just coming into town here for a couple of days, and whenever you got the opportunity to have Jonathan come, you take advantage of it.
And I feel whenever I get a chance to be with Rod, I got to take advantage of that too. So
That's right.
there we are.
Yeah, so we had, as you probably know, we had a kind of a deep dive actually on Joseph Smith and what he knew earlier this spring.
Yeah.
We had a 5-episode series basically that we did that went into that, and we love this community. We love you guys. We appreciate all the comments. In fact, I think we were getting 150 to 200 comments and so forth on many of these different things, and we do try to keep up with the comments. This falls on me though.
Yeah, that's your job.
Because this is my
That's
side.
right.
You have your sites. We're going to talk about that actually just
Okay.
in a little bit too.
Sure.
Just some of the
The resources.
different resources and so forth that Jonathan has. So he's busy taking care of his sites, and I'm busy trying to take care of ours. And even so, there's just not enough time today. So so what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple minutes and just talk about some of the things that we've been involved with here, and then just take a couple of the questions, some of the comments.
Okay.
There's been some great questions. We want to thank everybody for taking the time to write in their comments and things, and many times there's questions involved. We're going to actually take a couple of the questions and do that as well. So
Perfect.
anyway, we will we'll go ahead and kind of start off. So what have you been up to here lately?
What have I been up to?
Where in the world?
Where in the world am I? Right now, I'm in Utah. No, most of you know I live in Oregon.
Yeah.
You know, my wife and I, we have a place in Utah, but we don't come here very often. And we're here in Utah this week for a couple of reasons. And whenever we come down here, we try to take the chance to come see Rod.
So we appreciate that very much because it's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
You know, you're always just so busy. And I think you've been doing more with your artwork, or trying to do more.
I do a lot of artwork. I'm editing. I have some other book projects I'm working on.
Yeah.
And we do travel around a lot too. So.
Yeah, I never know when I call Jonathan. I never know where he's going to be.
Yeah, we do. We are going a lot.
Where in the world?
Where in the world?
Where's Waldo? Anyway, so
there you go.
So and I've been basically still. We've been working on a new conference that's coming up. We've got some amazing people coming to this conference. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be the end of the month of October.
Okay.
We couldn't find a venue. So we have a new venue that we're going to be doing. It's called the venue at the ranches on
nice.
Eagle Mountain.
Okay, that sounds good.
It's not as big, so we're going to have it's going to be a little more crowded and
More exclusive.
More exclusive. Yeah. Okay. But the nice thing is you can still always access all the information and so forth on the streaming website. Right. So we're excited about that. Hope you're enjoying the streaming website, and just want to give a shout out for everybody to let you know that that's where you can find. All of our podcasts are there, as well as all of the speakers from every conference we've had in the last about 4 or 5 years, and so we're excited about it.
A ton of content for sure.
There's a ton of content. So in fact, we're looking at revamping that and putting it up on like a Roku channel and so forth, so we can actually do that. So that's things that are coming up in the future. Some of the things that I've been working on. We've had a big thing with this. With Chief Midiga, and David Taylor, basically, and there was kind of a fluff up about that.
Okay.
No.
So why don't we talk about the questions that you wanted to have from the videos?
Let's do that. And so we're going to go. So there's 5 parts of the Joseph New series, and I think we're going to take a question from the third one, which is about Joseph Smith III.
Okay.
And I think the question here, let me see if I can pull it up here. I think it's behind us actually here.
About the Florida landing?
Yeah, so it says, so this is the question says, I have some questions about the possible Florida landing. I live here and would like to visit the place you believe Lehi might have landed. The question I have is, why does the Florida State Park say that these mounds were built between 1000 and 1500 AD? That puts the dates at least 600 years past the destruction of the Nephites. Just looking for some clarification because, as I said, my husband and I would like to visit the place. Thanks.
Yeah.
You want to start, or should I?
Go, you do that.
Okay. This is actually part of the reason why we had our Florida Explorer tour.
Yeah.
Basically, you know, that we kind of pick a different place every now and again, and then we just go with a group of people. We go down and kind of explore these things. Why Florida? There's several different things that I've talked about in previous videos, but number one, if you are in a ship and you're coming around Africa, which the Phoenicia did,
Right.
the natural wind currents would take you up into the Gulf of Mexico area.
Right.
As most people know, that's where hurricanes typically come in the Gulf of Mexico, and they go up around there. So if you have natural wind currents that go up there, then that would be a natural, normal location for that.
Yeah.
Also, when we talked about the promised land of Lehi and his family, being the United States, it makes the landing in the United States.
Sure.
So they would be landing on the promised land that they were being talked to about.
And it's around 30 degrees latitude, right?
Yeah, so it's about the same latitude actually as Jerusalem.
Right.
So the seeds that they would have brought with them from Jerusalem would have easily germinated and sprouted and grown.
Yeah.
And and very fertile soils there in Florida and so forth as well. For me, one of the key factors was actually Native American woman, and I haven't talked much about her, but I met her probably about 10, 15 years ago. And she's still alive, so I have to be careful about naming names and whatever.
Right.
But she was the last of her people to receive the oral history.
Right.
And so she grew up in northern Canada, did not have, and she actually lived in a teepee as a child. Saw the first person outside of her tribe when she was 16 years old.
Wow.
But she was taught the oral history, and then when she found the gospel, she talked, she said, we had already been well instructed about what we call him Father Lehi.
Right.
She did a lot of research after she found the gospel, and she knew from her previous teachings that the place where they came to land was interesting because the Native American people call this Turtle Island.
Right.
Which is the reason why
North America, you mean?
Yeah, North America is Turtle Island. Yeah. The reason why we call this Turtle Island is because when we first landed here, one of the first creatures that we found were actually turtles.
Yeah.
And she was of the belief, based on her oral history of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe language based people, that the landing place was very near Clearwater Beach, Florida.
Okay.
And there are several mounds there. Some of the mounds date after that time frame, like Tocobaga Mound and so forth. But there's Crystal River,
right?
Which is they actually have a big visitor center there, and they have everything. They have a really cool big it's not as ancient as Book of Mormon, but it's a canoe.
Yeah. Right.
Like an actual Native American canoe that was found in the mud of
preserved.
river there and preserved,
yeah,
and so forth, and they date back into Book of Mormon time frames, in the Crystal River area, which is very very close to Clearwater Beach,
right?
And so that's part of the reason why we talk about Florida. It could have been anywhere along that coast, but the main reason we talk about that is because the Hopewell civilization, the Mound Builder civilization, kind of has its start there.
Yeah.
The earliest mounds were built there in Florida. There's another place called Letchworth Love Mounds, just outside of Tallahassee, Florida, up on the panhandle of Florida.
Right.
And those are areas.
The answer to this question is that people continue to live there, right? So of course there would be some from 1000 to 1500 AD.
Yeah, like Tocobaga Mound is one that dates into that kind of.
It's outside of Book of Mormon time frames, but that's because people were still living there.
But all along the panhandle of Florida, there's middens, which are mounds of shells that were literally 10, 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
Nothing but seashells that were being eaten, and then they tossed the shells into the pile.
Right.
Consider that some of these mounds were 30, 40 feet long and 15 feet high and 25 feet at the base, and just nothing but mounds. That tells you that they were either a lot of people eating mussels and shellfish and so forth, or B, there was a few people who were there for a very long time. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of a combination of both. There was a lot of people that were there for a long time.
But the bottom line is that the Florida landing is consistent with the geography that you and I both
Yes.
think makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of answers that. So if you're going to go, take your husband and go, I'd start off with Clearwater, or well, go to Crystal River.
Right.
Go through there. There's several mounds there on that one particular site. It's really, really a beautiful site. I'd go check out Tocobaga Mound. If you want to go a little bit further, go up north and go up to there's a spring, Wakula Springs.
Mm-hmm.
Wakula Springs up there in Florida, where they've actually found mastodon bones and things there. And in the spring, it's literally like a huge river that comes up out of the ground. It's just beautiful. There's manatees, and you see alligators or crocodiles. I'm not sure which one it is. But anyway,
Okay.
big reptiles up there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's I think that's part of the reason why we
Yeah.
think that Florida may be the best place. But one of the things I love about Jonathan, he talks about multiple working hypotheses.
Right.
We're not saying that this is absolutely where it happened, but when you put the Native American tradition along with the with the prophecies
And
about
the
promised land and the archaeology, and the fact that Native Americans all across the United States call this Turtle Island, that it all plays into that narrative that this kind of makes the most sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said.
Should we go on to the next one?
Yes, do the next one. The next one is volcanoes in Illinois have been dormant for 300 million years. There is no sea for cities to sink into, no plains that became mountains. There are 36 volcanoes in Guatemala that could have caused the conditions. The Veracruz volcano used to be an island. That area is 105 miles. The whole discussion is about volcanoes. The only thing is, there's no volcanoes in the Book of Mormon. So we don't really know what the point of this question was.
It's kind of been assumed, it's not kind of, it has absolutely been assumed.
Oh yeah, it has by some.
By the Mesoamerica side of the Mesoamerica hypothesis.
Yeah.
That the destruction that is described in 35 chapters 8 and 9 can only be explained by a volcanic eruption of some sort. And there's been books about, there's been a book about the geology of the Book of Mormon that talks about, and again, like on page 4 or 5, the assumption is this is describing a volcanic eruption.
Right.
The only thing I find is interesting though, Jonathan, is that do you think Joseph Smith or the Lord would have known what the word volcano is?
Or even Mormon would have had a word for it.
Yeah, I mean,
If
it was a volcano, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities that the Lord or Moroni or Mormon or Joseph would have known.
Yeah.
And instead of beating around the bush and saying, well, there was 3 days of darkness, and there was, some cities were sunk into the sea, and others were, made mountains and so forth. Why don't you say, and there was a huge volcanic eruption?
Exactly. Yeah.
But there wasn't. In fact, there's nothing that identifies a volcanic eruption as the source of the destruction.
Well, and there's other explanations for the destruction that's described.
I've had a 2-hour-long video that's been out for over 10 years now about the New Madrid seismic zone and how that all. I mean, we actually
satisfies everything in this.
28 observations made by the prophet Nephi, and all 28 of them were observed in 1811, 1812. Right down to 3 days of darkness. So you have to read the book. you have to read it, and not just read it, but you have to kind of study.
Well, what this brings up is this whole what I call the faith model, where there's facts, assumptions, inferences, theories, and ultimately hypothesis. And the facts in this case are what we have in the text of the Book of Mormon. And then people make different assumptions about how to explain those facts, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of people said when they read the same verses, they say, well, this must be a volcano because in Central America they had volcanoes that would cause this destruction. But there's no fact in the text about a volcano. It's only the descriptions of this destruction that took place. And as you pointed out, right in the central part of what's now the United States in North America, along the Mississippi River, there's those same events have actually happened in recorded history, in recorded American history in 1811, 1812.
Yeah.
So
But people go, well, but that, okay, so that happened in 1811, 1812, so,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean anything as far as the Book of Mormon, but the fact is we have a USGS
Right.
seismologist by the name of Martisha Tuttle,
Yeah.
who actually went back and dug down into the ground using ground penetrating radar and actual, in the ground digging, where she found Native American artifacts and a what they call a living horizon, basically where they were the ground upon which they were standing and living had been buried by 7 to 10 feet of sand,
Right.
from sand blows that had literally covered them up.
That's right.
Which there's explanations that we've never had before. If you use the New Madrid seismic zone, and she actually found, and she and even published that there was a similar type of an event that happened right within 100 or 200 years of the time of Christ.
Right. Exactly.
So we think we've actually been able to identify the actual event in the ground, in the geology, if you will, that is being described in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and all this stuff is easily available at the museums at New Madrid, and in books and articles that are officially published that have nothing to do with LDS, right? It's just scientists know that.
Our greatest resources have been the people who have studied the New Madrid seismic zone for years and have come to some different conclusions about how big it was and how strong it was, and the fact that it's going to happen again.
That's right. It could happen anytime.
Yeah.
But we've explained all this in various references, books, videos, and resources. And this is an example of the kind of material that people can learn about on their own.
Yeah.
And we have a whole bunch of blogs we can talk about and web pages and stuff that we'll get to.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful for people to understand that there really are no questions that we haven't talked about before. Of all the dozens of questions that were on these videos, we've answered them all in various ways. And we want people to know that there are resources they can refer to.
Well, it is kind of fun. I have to just kind of harken back for a little bit. When I first started doing this research, and I was doing it on the DNA part, and I was always a little concerned when I would get up and do a presentation in front of an audience that there would be somebody who would ask me some question and I was like,
never thought of it before.
Never thought of that before.
Yeah.
And luckily, it didn't really happen, very much. People were pretty decent about it if they did, because it's kind of like stump the expert kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And there's always things that can stump because nobody knows everything about everything.
Sorry.
But it is interesting that over the course of time, over the course of years, I can't honestly think of any really significant question that has been brought up that we don't have at least some preponderance of evidence. I mean, sometimes there's not hard evidence.
Right.
That people go, well, what about elephants? Well, yeah, we got elephants, but they were here on.
Yeah. Well, and usually when there's a difference of opinion about something, or it's because of that not distinguishing between a fact and a hypothesis, or fact and assumption and inference, right? Yeah. And so people have, as you mentioned earlier, multiple working hypotheses. Because there's lots of different ways to interpret the facts. There's a lot of different ways to interpret the scriptures themselves, right? And so what we like to do is say, well, here's how we see it. People are free to believe whatever they want, right? And
also free to change their opinion over the course of time. I mean, you changed my opinion about the waters of Mormon as an example. But another thing, I think this is important to point out, and that is when you go to these places, like if you go to Crystal River or whatever, the archaeologists, the paleontologists, and so forth that have been working on these projects and so forth, they are also making a lot of assumptions.
Oh, absolutely, they are.
Especially when it comes down to dating.
Yeah.
So you can't just point and say something and say, oh, this is this particular date. Because, as an example, when I was working on an archaeological dig at Cahokia, and I talked to the main archaeologist there, and I asked her, so I said, the Fort Ancient people, basically,
right.
And the Cahokians, that's the later Mississippian culture, which is long after the Book of Mormon.
Right.
I said, but is there any hard evidence for this area being occupied previously by Hopo people? Because this is called a Mississippian site.
Right.
She said, oh yeah, the Hopo were definitely here before.
Yeah.
But the main site, the main features of the site were only Mississippian.
Yeah.
But people would go into that thinking that there was no Hopewell there
Yeah.
previously, and even the archaeologists said, no, there were Hopewell here, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
it's just like we
Yeah.
know there were Hopewell in Western New York too.
Right.
Because it isn't a high feature that people focus on. But when you ask the archaeologists out there, they say, well, yeah, we know there were Hopewell here, and here's where they were, and here's how they came from Ohio, and the whole thing.
There's artifacts that are specifically found in New York that have been found in Ohio.
Yeah, they were from Ohio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think what we also want to emphasize here today is that we recognize we're always open to new information. And let me just explain how I got involved with Rod in the first place. Because some people don't know this story. And years ago, I used to write novels, and I wrote a novel about Native Americans.
Hey,
You might have
one of those.
One of here. These are some of my books here.
There's
Yeah,
one.
it's called this one, The Rule of Equity.
Rule of Equity.
And so it was about how Native Americans were reasserting their rights under the treaties that they'd signed. And a friend of mine read it and said, oh, you need to meet this guy named Rod Meldrum. And I'd never heard of Rod before, so we went to a conference. He took me to one of Rod's presentations, and afterwards he had me come meet Rod. And Rod said, well, so what are you interested in? I said, well, I want to know more about Native Americans, how that relates to the Book of Mormon. Because back then I was a Meso believer, because that's what I've been.
Well, you've been to Mesoamerica.
Oh yeah, I've been to Mesoamerica, and I followed farms and Fair Mormon and all that stuff for a long time. And so you said, well, you have to come see Ohio. And I had traveled all around the world for business and fun and stuff. Never really been to Ohio. And I thought, why not go to Ohio, right? And so
this is the flyover zone.
Yeah, it was really.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. So I went on a tour with Rod and Wayne both, and it blew my mind. I was like, how come I never knew any of this happened? We'd go to museums, there would be head plates and breastplates, all the stuff the Book of Mormon talks about.
What are you talking about?
And so, so I wanted to know more.
Which is sad because actually most of those have not been taken off.
I know.
Almost all of the museums back east have been systematically removing all of the actual artifacts.
Yeah.
And they're claiming it's because of the NAGPR, the
Right.
American Race Protection Repatriation Act.
That's right.
That we are not being
Respectful
to them because they
Well, fortunately for me though,
but
I was there before.
History's being erased.
Well, unfortunately, I was there when they were still available.
Yeah.
And even there's some older ones that my father-in-law went to that you can't go to that were amazing. But anyway, so the point is I had to change my whole orientation. And I had to say, well, wait a minute, all the things I've been told about Central America being the booklands of the Book of Mormon, maybe that wasn't really the case. So I asked Rod, how do we ever get stuck in Central America? And he said it was because of these darn articles in the Times and Seasons. And because they said the Book of Mormon took place in Central America.
And everybody was saying, Joseph Smith wrote those articles. His name is right there on the boilerplate, and it's right there. He wrote these articles.
And it's even, they're even in Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith. So how do you refute that? So I became curious about this because I was trying to reconcile. I had some cognitive dissonance because here I was seeing in Ohio exactly what made sense from the Book of Mormon standpoint, but yet seeing in the Times and Seasons all this narrative about Central America. So that led me to do some investigation and led to my first book, and from then on. So my focus has been mostly on church history because that whetted my appetite.
We are so grateful that you took this up because you have become just absolutely the go-to guy.
Well, it's been really a fascinating thing to explore church history, but I also one of the first books that I did was called Moronize America because I also wanted to make sense of the geography for myself. And that's this book. And so,
by the way, all these books that are out behind you, these are all Jonathan's books.
Yeah. Okay. So
prolific writer.
So I really became interested in the geography, as we talked about, and answering these questions. But then I was just fascinated by how church history really told us the answers to these questions, but we overlooked it. And one example that's come up often now is the two sets of plates. And so, which is in that one little book called
that one.
Whatever happened to the golden plates,
I have your original version too.
Yeah, okay.
No, you cannot buy this.
Okay. But what was amazing to me, and I told Rod this just within the last 2 weeks, that it dawned on me that we should have known about the 2 sets of plates from Moroni's first visit to Oliver Cowdery. Remember I told you about this? Or to Joseph Smith? Because Oliver Cowdery wrote the most detailed account of Moroni's visit to Joseph Smith. And a lot of people have never even read it, even though it's in Joseph Smith's own journal and it was published in the Times and Seasons and all the early church newspapers. And he said that one night when Joseph was praying, he had, of course, Moroni's visit, and Oliver Cowdery asked him, he said, well, Joseph, what time of night was it? And he said, Joseph couldn't tell me what time of night it was, but it was after everybody had gone to bed. And he explains all, that's how much he was asking Joseph about what had happened. But he said that when Moroni came, he told him about the record and said it was written and deposited not far from Joseph's house.
Written and deposited.
Yeah, written and deposited.
Yeah.
So that's when it dawned on me, well, wait a minute, if the record was written near Joseph's house, we all know it was deposited there in the stone box on the Hill Cumorah. But if it was also written there, that means the Hill Cumorah is in New York, right?
Yeah.
Because Mormon said that when they got to Cumorah, he began to be old, and that's when he started doing the abridgment. But then I realized that the whole Book of Mormon could not have been written at Cumorah because only the abridged part was. Nephi, Jacob, and all those others down through Omni didn't live anywhere near Cumorah.
No, they were in the land bountiful, the land of Nephi.
Yeah, the land of Zarahemla, which we think is down Florida or Tennessee, is land of Nephi, and then up into Iowa and Illinois and so on. But even if it was in Central America, no matter where it wasn't near Cumorah.
It's not where the plates were deposited.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so when Moroni told Joseph Smith that the record was written and deposited not far from his house, we should have known right at that point that only the abridged record was in the stone box. And because that was written at Cumorah. And then, for those of you who may not be familiar, I'll summarize it real quickly, but the idea is that Mormon and Moroni abridged the record of the Jaredites and Nephites, put it in the stone box. Joseph Smith took the abridged record down to Harmony, and that's where he translated it.
So where were the rest of the records kept then?
Well, in the repository in Cumorah, like Mormon said. If you read Mormon 6:6, he says that he had all the records there that he'd been given charge of, all the records of the Nephites that he was abridging. So we've had artwork, I don't know if we can pull it up here on the video, of that painting was showing Mormon abridging the records. You know the one I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. With all the records all around, the way Oliver Cowdery described it.
Yeah.
And
I think David Lindsley did a version of that too.
Yeah, there may be 2, but not, I think did one. And,
not did one.
Yeah,
So,
there's a couple of them. But so, the point is that he took the abridged records down to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and translated all of it up to the title page, which was the last leaf of the plates. But if you remember that in D&C 9, the Lord told Oliver Cowdery, explained why he was not able to translate, and said, just finish this record, and then I have other records that you can help Joseph translate. And what were the other records? Well, we found out in the next section of the Doctrine and Covenants, section 10, Oliver and Joseph were thinking about going back and retranslating the Book of Lehi from the very beginning, the lost 116 pages. And the Lord said, no, don't go back and retranslate that. Instead, you have to translate the plates of Nephi. But they didn't have
the small plates of Nephi.
Well, he just says the plates of Nephi, because those were not the plates that Mormon had abridged. So they didn't have the plates of Nephi. And that's what was kind of dawned on me that, well, obviously they didn't have the plates of Nephi because the plates of Nephi were not written near Joseph's house. So Joseph gave the plates, the abridged plates, to the messenger. We took him back to the Hill Cumorah, left him there, got the plates of Nephi, and took those to Fayette. And that's how that's why Joseph translated the plates of Nephi and Fayette. Now that's a quick summary. There's a whole book about explaining the detail.
So which book is that?
Make sure well, it's in this, Whatever Happened to the Golden Plates.
Yes, that's right.
But it's also in this, a little bit, in this Rational Restoration, which is my most recent.
That's your most recent book.
But the reason this is all significant here is that it explains that actually it turns out Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery told the truth. Which,
imagine that.
It seems amazing, doesn't it? But they told the truth about the Hill Cumorah.
Yeah.
And they told the truth about the translation. It's so simple.
And everything really does make sense when it comes down to.
It does, yeah.
If you have the two sets of plates, because as you pointed out,
Yeah.
so I'm borrowing from you
Yeah,
information.
Yeah.
But the title page of the Book of Mormon was the last page that was the last leaf that was actually installed into the three-ring binder, if you will,
Yeah.
the gold plate.
The place that he got from the stone box.
Right, that they got from the stone box, and there's no mention there that the small plates of Nephi were in the stone box or anywhere near that.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that was to me was one of the biggest aha moments for
Yeah.
me when you pointed that out. It's like, oh my goodness, you're right.
Yeah.
There's the small plates of Nephi, and so where did they get those? Well, this is the other thing that you pointed out earlier, but we mentioned just now, and that is that in the words of Mormon.
Yeah.
Because that's actually, there was a comment on one of our recent.
Oh right, yeah. Okay.
On one of our podcasts that said, well, what about what about in the words of Mormon, where basically he's saying, I went into the repository of records and I searched the records.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, and I like to put myself kind of in the person's position.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Here you are, you're Mormon, basically, and you're searching around in this room full of records, and you come up to these ones, and maybe there's a cloth over some sort, and you blow the dust off of it from 400 years, and you open it up, and there's these plates. And you can still read them because you still are speaking, the language is still close enough that you can tell. And you look at it, and small plates of Nephi or something, emblazoned on the front. You go, whoa!
Yeah.
These are the ones that they were talking about in the large plates.
That's right.
So he takes those, and he says, and I put them with my other record.
Yeah.
My other records. So you kind of get the idea that it's been assumed that he took those small plates of Nephi. And he took them over, and he opened up the three-ring binder on his side of
the abridged place, yeah.
And he took the ones from the small plates of Nephi, and he set them into and he hooked them into the three-ring binder. The only problem is they were built, they were done like 1,000 years earlier.
Yeah.
And there's no high improbability that Nephi would have used the same hole punch pattern.
Well, even beyond that,
there's no way he would have installed them into his actual thing, and they weren't there in the box. So the bottom line is that where were they? He said he put them with his other record. My thought is they have a table.
Yeah.
Has Laban's sword on it, has the abridged plates.
Yeah.
Has the small plates of Nephi, and then only the abridged plates get put into the stone box. The other things are still there.
Yeah, exactly. And that phrase, put them with, we know that doesn't mean to attach, because it's used twice in Words of Mormon. And the first one was, I think it was King Mosiah said he put the plates with the other plates, but Mormon had to go searching for them. They weren't all attached.
Yeah.
And so there has been a long-term misunderstanding about that phrase when he said put them with, as if it meant to attach or to bind them, and it never meant that. In fact, he said that he used those small plates to write the rest of his abridgment, so that he would show that the prophecies that Nephi made had been fulfilled. So that's why he would keep them with him as he was doing his abridgment. It's really interesting to think about him doing it, like you said, because he had abridged that whole record up to basically the time of King Benjamin.
Yeah.
And then he found those small plates of Nephi. He said, oh man, these are awesome too. But those have more of the prophecies. Yeah. And so he wanted to put those with his work so that he could, make sure to show they were fulfilled.
I think it's interesting when he says, and for a very specific purpose.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that in the last probably year or so I've been doing a lot of pondering and involving that God, I think freedom and being able to make your own choices is a universal thing that God basically he will not impinge upon that. So he can't force things to happen, but he always has, I like to call it a backup plan. He always has a way to get around, not necessarily get around, but to overcome the shortcomings of people.
Yeah.
So like having that small plate, that small place. I mean, Nephi basically says, it's for a wise purpose that I do these things, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't know why he's doing that, and it wouldn't have made any sense if it wouldn't have come down to the last 116 pages,
right?
Because maybe we would have never have gotten the small
Well, we
places
wouldn't
in
have.
Nephi.
If Martin Harris hadn't lost them,
Yeah.
we never would have. But I like to
Yeah.
compare it to, let's say that instead of 116 pages, what if Martin Harris had taken the pages of King Benjamin's address and lost those? There's still a backup in the Hill Cumorah. No matter what Martin Harris lost, there was a backup in the repository that they could have gotten.
Yeah, God had his hard drive already full, basically sitting there
Right.
in the Hill Cumorah. But I like to liken that to our own lives.
Yeah.
I mean, so many times we make mistakes, like Martin Harris. I mean, and Joseph himself. He just flogged himself. He just beat himself up over the loss of those 116 pages. Like, oh my gosh, he thought he'd lost his salvation.
Yeah.
But it's the same kind of thing, I think, with the Lord in our own lives.
Yeah,
we
that's right.
we sometimes will flog ourselves and beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that it's all part of God's plan. That God needed us to make some of these mistakes so we could learn how to repent, learn how to come back to Him, learn how to
And there's always hope.
God always has another plan.
That's right. Exactly.
He's always got a backup plan. He's a do-over God.
Yeah. Good way to put it. And never give up.
Yeah, because there's always hope. And sometimes when life seems really the most hopeless is the time when we realize that you got to stick with God. Because unlike Satan, who basically he'll have his followers, but he'll let them just dangle in the wind.
Right.
When it comes down to it, but God always has a backup plan for us, for you,
and that's one of
the
important lessons of that whole experience, is to know that even though Joseph didn't have the plates of Nephi from the stone box, the Lord had him in that Hill Cumorah, that he would be there if he needed them.
Yeah.
So anyway, what that all boils down to in terms of the Book of Mormon geography, or the setting, what I call the origin and setting of the Book of Mormon, is it shows us that repository really was right there in New York, all along. Just like when Moroni told Joseph it was written and deposited not far from his house. That was true, actually. It wasn't written in Central America and hauled all the way up. It was written right by his house.
Yeah.
And of course, we have Lucy Mack Smith explaining that when Moroni came to Joseph Smith, he told him the place in the Hill of Cumorah, 3 miles from his house. Yeah. We have lots of other evidence about the Hill Cumorah in New York. And the reason that's important is knowing where the Hill Cumorah is in New York is not the same as knowing Book of Mormon geography. All that is one location. And there's an infinite variety.
But as you like to say, as you point out, it is a pin.
It is a pin in the map. So the Lord didn't leave us completely clueless about where the Book of Mormon took place. It was evident in multiple witnesses and statements from Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery both about the Hill Cumorah being in New York. It's even in Doctrine and Covenants 128. So we know that was there. And people ask, one of the questions that came up here maybe in the videos that I get asked often is about the essay on Book of Mormon geography. And if you read it carefully, it makes a couple of points. One, it says that the Book of Mormon events took place in the Americas. And where did that come from? It didn't come from the Book of Mormon itself, right? Because nothing in the Book of Mormon says the Americas. Yeah. So it came from the teachings of the prophets, Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery initially. That essay says nothing about Hill Cumorah either. So it wasn't addressing the Hill Cumorah at all. What it was talking about was theories based on what the prophets have taught us. And the prophets have only taught 2 things unambiguously about the setting of the Book of Mormon. One is Hill Cumorah's in New York, and 2 is the rest of the events took place in the Americas. That's all we know. So everything beyond that is speculation. And that's what that essay makes clear. And we never say that our theories about the Florida or any of that is driven by the prophets. That's our own interpretation. Everybody's entitled to your own interpretation. The only things that we know for sure from the prophets are Hill Cumorah and the Americas. And
I do like to add one other thing.
Yeah.
And that is the New Jerusalem.
Yeah, well,
if you assume that the revelations given to Joseph Smith about New Jerusalem are accurate, and then you have Ether and Moroni basically both going, hey, we live on the lands that are one day going to be the New Jerusalem.
That's right.
I think that's a pretty solid one.
That's pretty solid. And
it could be argued,
but it's not as unambiguous as the Cumorah and the Americas. Yeah. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
But again, these are, everybody has the same facts, We should all agree to the facts, and then we can make our own assumptions and inferences based on it.
Yeah, which goes into the whole multiple
Working hypotheses. Yeah.
So,
For us, though, the reason we love doing this, because for me it's purely a hobby, because I'm retired. I like going fishing in the ocean. I
and
like
golfing.
And golfing, and I spend a lot of time on my artwork and stuff. But I love this topic, the origin and setting of the Book of Mormon, because the Book of Mormon brings people to Christ. And one of the biggest impediments that people have for accepting the Book of Mormon is this idea is there's no evidence of the Book of Mormon. And as we've discussed, there's tons of evidence of it. And when you realize that it all makes sense, it attracts people, and people want to read the Book of Mormon and understand it better.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jonathan, I want to just thank you for taking your time to drop by here today and go over some of these comments and so forth.
Yeah. It's so fun to talk about.
I mean, look at this. I mean, infinite goodness, a man that can translate. Because of this series, the Lost City of Zarahemla, the ones that I have to be honest, I haven't read all of them.
Yeah.
All the way through, but I read all of them at least most of the way through, and some of them I've read all the way through several times. The Lost City of Zarahemla and Moroni's America, whatever happened to the gold plates, those are ones that directly impact the research that I've been doing more directly.
But it's very synergistic.
Yeah.
Because I like to find things in church history or in the text of the Book of Mormon, like the Jonathan Neville stuff, that corroborates what you're doing by looking at the physical evidence. Not that I'm not interested in physical evidence.
So much sense.
Done totally on that too. We don't have time to talk about, but it's very synergistic, and there's really three things involved. There's the text of the Book of Mormon, teachings of the prophets, and extrinsic evidence from archaeology, anthropology, geology, all that stuff, and all three work together. It's awesome.
So what do you think the future is as far as Book of Mormon geography and church history? Any new things?
You know what's funny?
Think you're going to be found that we're going to throw a wrench in the monkey?
I keep telling my wife I'm done writing any new books, and she says, "Yeah, you said that 10 times already." and I keep thinking I'm done because I've gone through everything,
Yeah.
But just this, like I told you about the 2 sets of plates, we should have known that from Rome's first visit, and that just dawned on me within the last 2 weeks or so, and so. I try to, I can't update books all the time, so I have blogs that we'll talk about later, where I update new discoveries and things, comments that people make. Yes. And, the readers and viewers help a lot in this whole process, just by the comments they make. And I noticed when going through the comments on YouTube, that a lot of the people would pose a question and then someone else would answer it. Which is awesome, because then we don't have to answer. and we're not the answer.
As long as it's correct.
Well, multiple working hypotheses.
But most of the time, actually, they're pretty accurate.
It is. It's great.
We want to thank all of you who go out there and read the blogs and so forth and answer the questions and so forth.
Well, I hear from readers and viewers all the time. They give me new ideas or they make corrections. I know in one of our videos I said it was Joseph Smith III who had rejected the Hills map, and someone commented and said, "No, it wasn't him; it was his son." And that's right. So we're not encyclopedias either. Yeah. Well, so we love the input. Yeah. We're always refining, and the key thing is we're open to new and better information always.
Well, also, so you're going to stick around for just a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll do a little more.
So just a little teaser alert here. We're going to be talking a little bit more about where you can find answers to some of the questions you have, specifically on church history. Yeah. With Jonathan's blogs and the things that are there, so we can help you kind of get it acquainted with some of them. And also, one of the questions that comes up all the time is how do we go about introducing people to this new research that there really is evidence? Because even on some of these, we've actually got people who just come in and say there's no evidence in the Book of Mormon. Yeah, right. Yeah. That's what our whole life's work is about here, is showing forth the evidence in the Book of Mormon. So anyway, so stay tuned here, and we're gonna have a couple of different episodes here with Jonathan. We sure appreciate all of your time. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button here on the bottom. Also, so you have a main website, which is MOBOM.
MOBOM, Museum of the Book of Mormon.
Okay, and our
acronym is MOBOM.
Yeah, and our main website is bookofmormonevidence.org.
Right.
And so you can find access to pretty much everything if you want
Yeah.
to know one of those two things.
Mhm.
And we're gonna
Right.
we actually are gonna be doing a part on the website called Book of Mormon Answers, and then Ryan actually is working on a book about Book
Okay.
of Mormon Answers, and so that's
Great.
that's something to look forward to here
Yep.
in the future.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.